Who should you be targeting on your Dynasty waiver wire this week? We're talking about that and more on today's episode of Locked On Dynasty.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Here are your hosts, Matt Williamson and Ryan McDowell.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks for making Locked On Dynasty your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by the Game Time app. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. I'm your host, Ryan McDowell. You can follow me on Twitter at RyanMC23. Joining me, as always, is former NFL scout Matt Williamson. Find Matt on Twitter at WilliamsonNFL. Matt, how's it going?
It's going well, man. How are you?
I'm good. It's Thanksgiving week, so happy Thanksgiving to you, to all our listeners.
You as well.
That's always good news. Mostly it means more football, maybe not more football, at least more often, right? We get a Friday game this year. We get 3 Thursday games. It's going to be a great week coming up. Maybe not a great week on your Dynasty waiver wire, though, because this is pretty ugly. Pretty ugly. As always, the waiver wire is dominated by injury-related news. And for that, we have to start by going back to that Thursday game. You talk about ugly. We lost Mark Andrews for the season. We lose Joe Burrow for the season. The future of the short-term future of the Bengals and the Ravens obviously impacted in a major way by those two moves. And that leaves us with Isaiah Likely, starting tight end for the Ravens. I like him quite a bit, probably on a lot of teams already or rostered in a lot of leagues. But if he's out there, honestly, if he's on your waiver wire, he might be the number one target of the week. For the Bengals, we've got Jake Browning expected to start moving forward. That's not so great.
Not the same. Likely's very attractive. Browning,
Yeah, I think the Bengals are in trouble there for sure. I saw their playoff chances drop to 10%, I believe, at least according to some metric that's out there. Not a good deal for the Bengals. Obviously, that hurts. I mean, it hurts Jamar Chase. It hurts T. Higgins. It hurts Joe Mixon. It hurts everybody in that Cincinnati offense.
Oh, massively. I mean, I think they're going to have a really difficult time moving the ball. They have a really difficult schedule ahead. You feel bad for the receivers, especially Chase and Higgins, of course. I'm sure Mixon will get more of a workload, but just against stiffer boxes,
Yeah. More quarterback news, and probably more quarterbacks you don't really want to target on your waiver wire. Although, again, in Superflex, every starting quarterback is worthy of a roster spot. The Jets are finally making a move, benching Zach Wilson. In fact, not only benching Zach Wilson, but dropping him down to that emergency QB3 status. Tim Boyle is the new starter for the Jets. I mean, I would say, Matt, we haven't seen much of Tim Boyle. He's bounced around. I think he was with the Packers and Lions. Maybe that's wrong. But just the fact that it took the Jets so long to make the move to go to Tim Boyle is probably a bad sign for him and a signal that we don't really want any part of him in fantasy.
Yeah, I mean, this has been right there with the Giants as hardest offense to watch, worst offense in the league. And Wilson had a lot to do with that. And the fact that they didn't make a move earlier probably tells you all you need to know about Mr. Boyle.
Well, the Zach Wilson era seems to be over. Hopefully it is. I mean, that guy should not start a game in the NFL really ever again. More quarterback news. Desmond Ridder gets another shot. We saw him come in back in week 10 in place of an injured Taylor Heineke. The Falcons on bye in week 11. And Heineke's like, what was the old movie? Was it Friday, Matt, where you lost your job on your day off? I don't know if you saw.
No, I don't know. Yeah,
from when we were back when we were young.
We were young pups.
Yeah, Taylor Heineke got fired on his day off. He lost his job on his bye week as Desmond Ridder was named the starter. I mean, this is like, what are we doing here?
Yeah, this isn't great either. But I guess he should be in leagues. He does run a little bit. I'm not real excited about it, but pick him up, I guess, if he's out there.
Ridder, Boyle, Jake Browning. Which one do you want the rest of the season?
Ridder. I mean,
barely, right?
It's rough. Yeah. Nah, I think clearly, but barely. Not good.
Real bad.
Yeah.
A couple other guys. Let's get away from those ugly quarterbacks. A couple other interesting names here. Israel Abanikanda, a guy that I know Matt and I both liked during that rookie process, lands with the Jets and kind of gets buried there behind, obviously, Breece Hall, behind Michael Carter, behind Zonovan Knight. Well, Knight was cut earlier in the season, maybe even before the season started, actually. And then Michael Carter, a little bit of a surprise move last week, gets cut. He ends up on the Arizona Cardinals. And we see Abanikanda get a little work this past Sunday. So we're certainly not wishing any ill will on Breece Hall. But if Abanikanda ended up on your waiver wire, he's definitely a player to go ahead and add, as he looks like he could be the RB2 in New York.
Yeah, definitely worth looking into. He's fast, straight line guy, productive at Pitt. I watched a lot of Izzy, kind of a straight line dude. And really, is there any value now of giving Dalvin Cook touches either? You know?
Here's the value. I forgot about Dalvin Cook. I mentioned Zonovan Knight and forgot about Dalvin Cook. So that's kind of that's where his career stands. But yeah, you're right. Cook, I guess, is still the RB2 there, but Abanikanda, the one that I would rather roster. Cook is obviously in that roster clogger range now, where you're not starting him. He has no trade value, but he does still have name value. So he's probably rostered in nearly every dynasty league. He just doesn't deserve to be. We saw some good news and some bad news from the Miami Dolphins in week 11 as Devon Achane got back on the field, but not for long. Got that knee rolled up on or landed on, and he was out of the game once again. The reports are weird here. It sounded like it was precautionary, that he didn't actually re-injure it, but then they also mentioned that he doesn't need surgery. I mean, that's a good thing, but if that's even being brought up, that's kind of a scary situation. I think we're probably going to see Achane miss some more time. So that means Jeff Wilson, who was a healthy scratch last week, and Savon Ahmed, who came in once Achane left the game. Those are the two guys, once again, to target on your waiver wire.
And the other thing I'll add to that is, you're right. I mean, it's weird you'd even bring up the word surgery with Achane, but Mostert might be slowing down a little. He's got a pretty big workload. He's got quite the injury history. He's not young. What if he gets hurt? Then you're really happy you have one of these guys.
Well, I mean, we've kind of said it all year, and plenty of others have as well. With this offense, you want all the running backs, right? All these guys are worthy of roster spots. They really have been all season, even when they've been hurt, even when they've been healthy scratches, because of both the injury history of guys like Raheem Mostert and unfortunately now even Achane, but mostly due to the explosive upside of this offense and how productive those running backs can be in this system. Last name to throw out here for the waiver wire portion of the show, Donald Parham. We saw him get a majority of the work for the Chargers. Gerald Everett banged up again. Sounds like it's not a long-term injury for Everett. Maybe he's back soon, but Parham probably worth a roster spot, certainly in those tight end premium leagues. He's a guy to grab if still out there. Those are the waiver wire players you need to know about. Again, Isaiah Likely, kind of the key name. And if you're desperate at quarterback, if you lost Joe Burrow, if you somehow were relying on Zach Wilson or Taylor Heineke, you probably just need to quit playing Dynasty football, but might also want to consider Tim Boyle or Desmond Ridder. Matt, the rest of our show, we are going to take a look at the rest of season strength of schedule. We've done this recently. As we focused on the 5-star strength of schedule from our buddies at Fantasy Pros. Now we're going to the other end of things, looking at those 0 and 1-star strength of schedule for the rest of the season. These are going to be players you don't want any part of, and we'll name those names right after this.
So I mentioned this before that I went away with the Steelers to St. Vincent's College, here in Latrobe. It was away from home. And I got back, camp broke on a Thursday, and Guns N' Roses was playing on Friday, and I was kind of testing out the water. You think me and my buds can sneak to Guns N' Roses after kind of being gone for the month? And my wife was certainly cool with it. As soon as I go home, she's like, go, 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 go. So we kind of had a last-minute situation there, and I hit the Game Time app. The Game Time app worked out great for me. I mean, it's a fast, easy way to buy your tickets for sports, music, as I mentioned, comedy, theater. Definitely going to do this for some comedy stuff that's coming around here. They got great last-minute deals, all-in prices. You get views from your seat. That was pretty cool. And their best price guarantee, it takes the guesswork out of buying tickets. So that there is phenomenal too. They have flash deals. They have zone deals, views from all seats in the venue, the lowest price guarantee, event cancellation protection, job loss protection. I mean, so you can buy your tickets in seconds with just 2 taps. One thing I really appreciated was they had all-in price to show your total up front. So you're not getting a great deal without you're getting a great deal without the hidden fees. Hidden fees are obviously an interesting or a point of emphasis here. With zone deals, you pick the section and Game Time picks the seats, but you get an average of 18% savings there. So that's phenomenal as well. So please download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Now, this show is sponsored by BetterHelp. And I did some therapy way back when. It was great for me. And I don't even know why I got away from it, to be honest with you. And it's starting to get holiday season, and I know that can be some seasonal blues for people. And frankly, for me, as much as I love my job, the week after week grind can wear you down a little bit. So this time of year can be a lot, and it's natural to feel some sadness or anxiety or whatever about it. But adding something new and positive to your life can counteract some of those feelings. Therapy can be a bright spot amid all the stress and change. Something to look forward to, helps you feel grounded, gives you the tools to manage everything going on, so there's a lot there to like. I mean, but if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. I mean, it's entirely online, which is going to work great for my schedule, designed to be convenient, flexible, suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and you get matched with a licensed therapist. You can switch those therapists anytime you want, no additional charge for that. So find your bright spot this season with BetterHelp. Visit BetterHelp.com/lockedon today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/lockedon.
Matt, let's talk rest of season strength of schedule. I realized that in some of my main dynasty leagues, we start the playoffs pretty early. So we have just a couple of weeks left in our regular season. It's wild to think about that. If you are in the playoffs, you certainly need to be positioning yourselves to be as successful as possible. Over the past couple of weeks, we've talked about the rest of season strength of schedule. We've used the tool found on Fantasy Pros. I believe that is a free tool, so certainly check that out. We've looked at those players that have a great schedule left and mentioned those as possible trade targets. Let's go the other way, Matt. These players have either a 0 or a 1-star rating the rest of season strength of schedule players you want to avoid. There's some high-end names and some players you probably wouldn't have been counting on anyway. You mentioned the challenging schedule for the Bengals. This is not a surprise. Jake Browning, he's actually the only player, or the Bengals quarterback position is the only one that has a 0-star rating across the board. So let's not be using Jake Browning in your lineups moving forward if you can at all avoid that. But the other name's kind of interesting here. It's Baker Mayfield, who's had a pretty good season, it feels like, for the Buccaneers. Certainly a surprising season. A couple of teams a year ago gave up on him, but here he is with some solid fantasy production. Maybe not somebody you want to, again, be relying on given the schedule moving forward, though. What are your thoughts on Baker big picture?
Yeah, interesting, because I think all in all, he's been a success story. I'm impressed with their offensive coordinator. He has weapons. So maybe he's the ideal guy in like a super flex to dump to that team that's really hurting for one more starter, because all these injuries, there's probably somebody in your league that qualifies. What's interesting to me, though, is Evans is a free agent after the year. They don't have a lot of money. They probably aren't bad enough to get an early pick quarterback. Could Mayfield get run back? Or I would think at a minimum there's some kind of competition for him. I mean, do they trade for Justin Fields if they take the guy high? Or you can see something being done here. I can't imagine just settling with Mayfield as well as he's played if you're the Bucs.
I guess. I mean, you're always looking, unless you hit on that franchise guy, you're always looking to make some improvements there. I mean, that's how guys like Jimmy Garoppolo and Derek Carr lose their jobs after multiple year runs with their teams. But again, going back to our first segment, we're talking about names like Desmond Ridder and Tim Boyle and Zach Wilson as starters. So, I mean, it always goes back to the question, is Baker Mayfield one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the world right now? Yeah. Absolutely he is. So is he starting for the Bucs next year? I have no idea. But he better be starting for someone. I can't imagine a situation where he's not. He is the quarterback 15 on the season. He's outscored Trevor Lawrence. He's outscored Joe Burrow. I mean, obviously that becomes clear moving forward. But up until this point, they've played the same number of games. So Baker Mayfield's been okay. I like the idea. Maybe you target the Burrow manager in your league and see if he or she is interested in a guy like Mayfield. Make a move there, pivot from him to one of these quarterbacks with a better schedule that we talked about last week. Let's move over to the running back position, Matt. We just have a couple of 1-star strength of schedule guys here. Some interesting names because these are players that have been, I would say, mainstays in fantasy lineups. We've got James Cook. The Buffalo Bills have a tough running back schedule for the rest of the season. And then the Seattle Seahawks. We saw Kenneth Walker suffer an oblique injury on Sunday. Sounds like he's going to miss some time. If that's the case, we finally get to see quite a bit more of the rookie Zach Charbonnet, but maybe that schedule is not so friendly. Could be bad news for Charbonnet.
Yeah, real quick on the Bills. I'm sure they don't take weather into account, but there's going to be weather late in the year. They host New England in week 17. I'm just pulling up the schedule here. But I'm glad you brought up Seattle. I mean, this is nuts. They host the Niners which is an awful matchup, on Thanksgiving. Then they go to Dallas. Then they go to San Francisco. Then they host the Eagles. I mean, what a nightmare upcoming 4 games for Seattle. I mean, San Fran twice, Dallas, and Philly.
Oh, man. Yeah, if you were relying on Walker, maybe you got bailed out with that injury, honestly. But that schedule is rough for Geno Smith, who also got hurt on Sunday, for those receivers, for Zach Charbonnet. That's certainly a situation to avoid. Yeah. I would not pivot off of either Walker or Charbonnet as far as trading them simply because of the schedule. I mean, to me, those are still guys to invest in long term. James Cook is a guy I would be willing, if I could flip him for someone with a better short-term outlook, I'm willing to do that. I don't see him as a long-term asset at the position.
Yeah, I keep thinking the Bills need to go get a power back, and be a less finesse team and go get Mike Allstott, especially considering the where they play, and you're hopefully hosting AFC Championship games in the snow. I don't want a 190-pound running back.
Yeah, good point. We still need to talk pass catchers. We'll do that next.
So score early this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 money line bet. So think about that for a second. You could take the most favored team, and all they have to do is hit the money line for $5, and you get $150. I mean, that's $150 if your team wins. I mean, that's great. If you're thinking about it, joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use. There's a wide range of betting options, including, overs and over-unders, player props, spreads, futures, et cetera, everything you're looking for. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, official partner of the NFL.
Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows covering every league. Go to Locked On Sports Today on YouTube and subscribe to the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel. Matt, we get a little good news at the wide receiver position. There are no teams, no wide receivers with a 1-star strength of schedule for the rest of the season. So that's a good thing. We do have several interesting players with a 2-star schedule, though, and some of these are players that I would potentially consider trading, not only because of their schedule, but for other reasons as well. Let's start with your Pittsburgh Steelers, George Pickens, Deontay Johnson. It's always tough to figure out which is going to be a Johnson game versus a Pickens game. And honestly, right now that passing game is so bad that I don't know if I want either one of these guys. Then you factor in that they have a tough schedule moving forward. What do you think about Pickens and Deontay?
Yeah, I'm just going to nerd out here for a second, but I mean, Pickens has been targeted 20 times over the past 4 games. He has 10 catches for 106 yards. That's 26.5 receiving yards per game over the last 4 games. I mean, that's rough. Johnson's been targeted 12 times over his last 2 games and has just 3 catches for 33 yards against the Browns and Packers combined these past 2 weeks. I mean, neither one is usable until this passing game gets better. And I will say, in my Steelers' defense, they have faced the most difficult slate of defenses, top to bottom defenses, including the Browns, which were awesome the other day. But it doesn't sound like it gets much easier for the wideouts.
No, it doesn't. I know we're focused on receivers here, but I found a stat on Kenny Pickett and tweeted this out earlier in the week. Don't know if you saw this one, Matt. Since the year 2000, a quarterback has started at least 16 games and averaged less than 10 fantasy points 8 times. Kenny Pickett is on pace to do this and become the 9th player, or the 9th time that this has been done. This is his company. Drew Bledsoe did it twice. Vinny Testaverde late in his career. Kyle Bowler. David Carr, not Derek, David Carr did it twice. Joey Harrington and my Kentucky boy, Tim Couch. Yeah, not the company you want to be keeping. That's where Kenny Pickett is right now. Washington Commanders have an interesting pair of receivers as well. Terry McLaurin, Jahan Dotson. They don't have a great schedule for the rest of the season either. Matt, are you willing to move either or both of these Washington receivers?
I really like both players a lot.
Okay. I know you're a McLaurin guy.
Yeah. I mean, I guess there's questions about coaches, quarterbacks, a lot in this organization, but I would listen to offers, but it would take a lot to move either one of them. I'm pretty high on Pickens and Johnson, too, as players.
What about Christian Kirk and Calvin Ridley? Those two and the Jaguars have a tough schedule for the rest of the season as well. Of course, we saw Calvin Ridley have a big game.
Yeah, maybe he's
finally.
Maybe you send an offer getting him out off your roster right now while you can kind of sell him high. Kirk's not going to bring back quite as much. He's been a little slower. None of these guys have to go by any stretch. I mean, especially because you mentioned these aren't 0 or 1-star strength of schedule matchups. They're 2. So they're not great, but they're not the worst either.
I think Ridley maybe has to go.
You think?
He's 29 years old. I would, if I can move Ridley based on what we saw in that nice game on Sunday, I would do it quickly. And honestly, I would take most of these names we've already mentioned, even though they do have a rough schedule for the rest of the season. Last guy on the list, Amari Cooper, a tough schedule for the Browns as well. And that's honestly, that does not even factor in the loss of Deshaun Watson when you consider that it's going to be probably the rookie DTR throwing Cooper passes. That hurts him even more, not to mention the schedule. So Cooper is another player. It's going to be tough to move him because of what we all know about the quarterback issue there in Cleveland. One tight end on the list, it's Cade Otton. You probably weren't starting Cade Otton anyway, and honestly, you can't get much, if anything, in trade for him. But if you were using him, if you were desperate at tight end, you might want to look a different direction because the Bucs, as we already talked about with Baker Mayfield, have a tough schedule for the remainder of the season as well. Matt, any other thoughts on any of these players moving forward?
I don't think so. I think we kind of laid it out, and these aren't hard, steadfast rules, and defenses will get injured between now and then. Yeah. I mean, it's subject to change to some degree, but the good things to be aware of.
That's exactly what I was going to say. It's another piece of the puzzle. It doesn't mean you can't start them moving forward. There are some good matchups still mixed in there. And honestly, none of these players are wide receiver 1 types anyway. These are wide receiver 2 and 3s, 2s and 3s that essentially are good depth pieces. So hopefully you've got a good enough team where you can just leave these players on your bench when they have those tough matchups, but also consider pivoting if that's an option. That is going to do it for today's show. Please make sure you download and subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Remember to follow the show at Locked On Dynasty. Follow Matt at Williamson NFL. And I'm Ryan MC23. We'll be back next time with more Locked On Dynasty.